The mystery of Grigori Rasputin, the Tsarist court sorcerer, and the enigma of his mysterious death. 5 bizarre facts about Grigori Rasputin's death. Few stories in human history are as shrouded in mystery, cruelty, and controversy as the death of Grigori Rasputin, the enigmatic monk who defied death multiple times before fate sealed his fate. On a cold winter night, under the gloomy skies of Petrograd, one of the bloodiest and most controversial assassinations in history was orchestrated, a story that continues to defy logic and fuel the imagination to this day. Rasputin's body was discovered under the ice of the Neva River, mutilated and riddled with bullets. And yet, it is said that until the very last moment, just before he was thrown into the icy waters, he fought death with an almost supernatural strength. Who was Rasputin really? A visionary saint or an evil sorcerer? How did he manage to attract the hatred and fear of both the Tsarist aristocracy and the Bolsheviks? But the most disturbing aspect of his story is not his controversial life, but the bizarre and terrifying circumstances surrounding his death. Beyond his assassination plot, the poison that didn't kill him, the bullets that didn't stop him, and the rumors that he drowned, Rasputin's death remains an enigma littered with unanswered questions. Today, we invite you to discover 5 bizarre facts about the death of Grigori Rasputin, each of which defies reason and adds a new piece to this dark puzzle. Prepare to enter a story that will raise the hairs on the back of your neck and awaken in you the desire to know more. The truth may be hidden beneath layers of lies and mystery, but it still lurks, just like Rasputin's cold gaze and the photographs he left behind. What secrets does the death of this enigmatic monk hold? Let's explore them together. What details do you know about the death of Grigori Rasputin? On January 1, 1917, the body of Grigori Rasputin, advisor to the leaders of Tsarist Russia, was discovered beneath the frozen surface of the Neva River. Rasputin had been shot 3 times and horribly mutilated. His killers had apparently gouged out his right eye. All were suspects. Rasputin was considered a sorcerer with a sinister influence on the Tsar. He was hated by both the Tsarists and the Bolsheviks. He had made powerful enemies even outside of Russia. Prince Felix Yusupov took responsibility for Rasputin's murder, claiming that he and 4 other conspirators had killed him together. To this day, Yusupov's story is the one that stands out in history books. But Yusupov's confession doesn't fit the facts at all. Every detail of the story is contradicted by autopsy and evidence. Today, no one knows for sure how this controversial monk met his end. So, here are some details about Grigori Rasputin's death. 1. He received a death threat the day before he died. The morning of December 29, 1916, began like any other for Grigori Rasputin, the mysterious monk who had become a central figure in the political and spiritual life of Tsarist Russia. However, something about that day was different. The events that followed would mark the beginning of his tragic end. Rasputin was in his modest home in Petrograd with his daughter, Maria, when the phone rang. In a city dominated by plots, revolts, and rumors, such calls were not uncommon. Rasputin, though accustomed to receiving death threats almost daily, seemed troubled by this particular message. The voice on the other end of the line was foreign, but the message was clear. "Your days are numbered, Grigori Efimovich. You will die soon. And Russia will be freed from your evil influence." This threat would be the last of many to haunt Rasputin. Over the years, his power over Tsar Nicholas II, and especially Tsarina Alexandra, had earned him both fanatical admirers and deadly enemies. It was rumored that he controlled the Tsar's decisions and that his influence was a curse on the monarchy. This made him a target for various groups, from disgruntled aristocrats to the Bolsheviks who were preparing the revolution. His daughter Maria would describe that day in a later diary. "Father was agitated and restless, although he tried not to show it. He seemed to know that something bad was going to happen." Throughout the day, Rasputin was seen consulting with a few close friends, and his agitation became obvious to everyone around him. The monk, usually confident in his abilities to manipulate and control difficult situations, seemed to be overcome by an invisible burden. Although accustomed to threats, this latest warning had deeply disturbed him. Later that day, Rasputin made a statement that would become emblematic of his end. "I feel that I will die soon. If it is the Tsarist hands that kill me, then the Tsar and his family will perish in 2 years. If it is the hands of the peasants, Russia will survive, but the imperial family will be destroyed." To this day, no one knows for sure who made that phone call. A careful analysis of the events and testimonies shows that it was not Felix Yusupov, the leader of the group that assassinated Rasputin, who was on the other end of the line. Yusupov and his accomplices had spent the day trying to orchestrate the plan that would lead to the monk's assassination. Furthermore, no other member of the conspiracy has claimed responsibility for that phone call, and historical sources have failed to find any conclusive evidence. The only certainty is that the call was made, and its effect on Rasputin was devastating. This last warning may have been a catalyst for Rasputin's anxiety. That evening, he attended a religious service and discussed with some of his close associates the apocalyptic signs he was sensing. According to some of these witnesses, he had a dark vision of his own and the imperial family's end. However, what remains fascinating and inexplicable is who could have wanted to warn Rasputin just a day before the assassination. Was it an attempt to make him flee? Or a psychological game designed to destabilize him before the inevitable plot? Thus began the last day of Grigori Rasputin, a monk who, despite his mystical aura, could not escape his tragic fate. This mysterious threat remained the first sign of a bloody night that would write a black chapter in Russian history. 2. The death of Grigori Rasputin. Not even cyanide could kill him. The plan to eliminate Grigori Rasputin had been carefully and comprehensively prepared by the group of conspirators led by Prince Felix Yusupov. They, convinced that Rasputin was the cause of the decline of the monarchy and a danger to the future of Russia, had decided that his end was inevitable. But what was supposed to be a quick and simple execution turned into a nightmare full of unexpected events, which further amplified the mystical aura of this controversial monk. A poisoned meal, full of lethal intentions. On the evening of December 29, 1916, Rasputin was invited to Yusupov's palace under the pretext of a social gathering. The prince had told him that his wife, Irina, would like to meet him, and this promise, along with a rich meal and refined wines, seemed enough to convince the monk to accept the invitation. However, behind the displayed hospitality, the conspirators had prepared their plan. Before Rasputin arrived, Dr. Stanislaus de Lazavert, one of the conspirators, poisoned the desserts and wine with a lethal dose of cyanide. The plan was simple: Rasputin would consume the poisoned food and die quickly, without complications. The dose of cyanide was so large that, in theory, it would have been enough to kill an elephant. However, what followed defied logic and fueled legends of Rasputin's superhuman endurance. Rasputin arrived at the palace relaxed, though still troubled by the death threat he had received that morning. He was led to a room specially decorated to make him feel at ease. There, Yusupov offered him a generous serving of desserts and wine, all containing the meticulously prepared cyanide. Incredibly, Rasputin began to eat the cakes without showing any sign of suffering. After a few minutes, he even asked for a second portion. The poisoned wine, intended to complete the conspirators' plan, was consumed just as carelessly by the monk. Meanwhile, Yusupov, becoming increasingly restless, watched Rasputin with a troubled gaze. Time passed, but the monk seemed completely unharmed. This unexpected resistance of Rasputin caused panic among the conspirators. Something was wrong. Was it possible that the dose of cyanide was insufficient? Or, as some believed, did Rasputin really have supernatural powers that made him invulnerable to poisons? The mystery remains to this day. Lies, regrets, or hidden truths? Decades later, Dr. Lazavert, responsible for preparing the poison, confessed that he did not have the courage to carry out the plan. He claimed that at the last moment he decided not to use real cyanide, substituting a harmless substance, due to remorse. However, this testimony was met with skepticism. Why would he have participated in the plot if he was not willing to take ultimate responsibility? On the other hand, there are other explanations. Some historians suggest that the cyanide was ineffective because of the way it was prepared. The high temperature of the food could have neutralized the poison, making it harmless. Others believed that Rasputin was accustomed to small doses of poisons, previously used as a precaution against the assassination attempt, which would have given him a natural resistance. Regardless of the explanation, one thing is certain: the cyanide did not work, and Rasputin continued to live, defying all the conspirators' expectations. As the minutes turned into hours, Yusupov began to lose control. Rasputin, with his deep voice and calm demeanor, seemed to control the atmosphere. Meanwhile, the conspirators, hidden in the adjoining rooms, were growing increasingly impatient. The failure of the poison had forced them to quickly find an alternative. Rasputin, however, seemed unaware of the situation he was in. He began to speak of visions and prophecies, warning Yusupov of the tragic fate that would befall Russia if he, the monk, were killed. These words, combined with the impossibility of killing him by poisoning, deepened the panic and confusion among the conspirators. The cyanide that was supposed to end Rasputin's life became only the beginning of a nightmare for those who had planned the assassination. The failure of the initial plan triggered subsequent events, which culminated in the brutal violence and the mystery that still surrounds his death. This first failed attempt to kill Rasputin added a new layer of legend to his life. An ordinary man would not have survived a lethal dose of poison, but Rasputin did. Was this a coincidence, a miracle, or proof that this man was anything but ordinary? The answers remain as dark and mysterious as his death itself. 3. The shot that failed to kill him. When the poison proved useless against Grigori Rasputin, the conspirators went into a state of panic. Any hope that their plan would go smoothly was dashed. Prince Felix Yusupov, the leader of the conspiracy, felt the tension rising with every minute. Rasputin, calm and seemingly invulnerable, had eaten and drunk the poisoned food without showing any signs of suffering. His prophetic words about the fate of Russia had deepened the anxiety in the souls of the conspirators. At that moment, they understood that they had to resort to more direct methods. The moment of the fatal decision. Frustration and pressure from the other conspirators pushed Yusupov to take drastic measures. According to his memoirs, he left the room to consult with the others, but when he returned, Rasputin's calm and silent gaze made him understand that he could wait no longer. He took a pistol from the table and, in an impulsive gesture, pointed it at the monk's chest. Without hesitation, he fired a bullet, and the noise resounded like thunder in the stillness of the night. Rasputin collapsed to the floor, blood beginning to flow from the wound in his chest. His body struggled for a few moments, then stopped. Dr. Lazavert, who was nearby, examined the body and confirmed the monk's apparent death. Believing Rasputin to be dead, the conspirators began to implement their plan to hide his body. One of them dressed in the monk's clothes and went to his house to create the illusion that Rasputin had returned home. Meanwhile, the others began to carry the body out of the palace. But things took an unexpected turn. As Yusupov returned to the room to check on Rasputin's body, he witnessed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. According to his account, Rasputin, whom everyone believed to be dead, suddenly stood up. His eyes burned with inexplicable fury, and blood flowed from his wound. He made a guttural, almost inhuman sound and threw himself at Yusupov, grabbing him by the collar. Panicked, the other conspirators ran into the room and began shooting at Rasputin. 2 more bullets found their target, one hitting his liver and another piercing a kidney. Rasputin collapsed again, but his spasmodic movements and labored breathing continued to disturb the atmosphere. No one could understand how this man could possibly survive such serious injuries. The last bullet, the fatal blow. Vladimir Purishkevich, one of the conspirators, decided that he had to end it once and for all. He took a pistol and, from a short distance, shot Rasputin in the head. He collapsed to the floor for the last time, his movements completely ceasing. Or so the conspirators believed. After this final shot, the conspirators tied up Rasputin's body and wrapped it in a thick cloth. Believing that the danger was over, they took him to the Neva River, where they would dispose of the body. But the story does not end there. A supernatural figure or a victim of lies? The accounts of Yusupov and the other conspirators fueled the idea that Rasputin possessed mystical, almost demonic powers. His story, in which poison and multiple gunshots were not enough to kill him, captured the public imagination and reinforced the myth of the monk as a supernatural figure. However, subsequent medical reports have cast doubt on these accounts. An autopsy by Professor Dmitry Kosaratov showed that the bullets that struck Rasputin had never entered his heart. It seems that Yusupov's description of his death was exaggerated and tended to amplify the legend and justify the conspiracy. The story that Rasputin got up after the first shot has also been questioned. Some sources suggest that this account was invented to make the assassination seem more dramatic. Even though the truth about the night of the assassination remains partially hidden, Rasputin's death has become a symbol of the decline and chaos that would engulf Russia. The story of the shots that did not kill him not only reinforces the myth of the monk, but also highlights the fragility of the conspirators, who found themselves facing an opponent more tenacious than they imagined. Regardless of the scientific explanations or contradictory testimonies, one thing is certain: Rasputin was more than a man. He was a legend, and his death, marked by almost inhuman resistance, continues to fascinate and inspire stories of horror and mystery. 4. The death of Grigori Rasputin. The autopsy contradicts everything Yusupov said. After the chaotic night in which the conspirators tried to eliminate Grigori Rasputin by poisoning, shooting, and finally throwing his body into the icy waters of the Neva River, the story was not over. Although the conspirators were convinced that they had finally killed the monk, the discovery of his body and the subsequent forensic examination raised important questions about how the assassination actually took place. The autopsy conducted by Professor Dmitry Kosaratov revealed details that contradicted almost every aspect of the accounts of Felix Yusupov and the other conspirators, turning Rasputin's death into an even deeper enigma. The Yusupov story, a drama full of exaggerations? In his memoirs, Felix Yusupov describes an intense struggle and a Rasputin who miraculously survived the poison and multiple gunshots, continuing to get up and fight even after being shot in the head. According to him, Rasputin was bound, wrapped in a sheet, and thrown into the Neva River, where he eventually drowned. But these dramatic accounts, which seem like something straight out of a Gothic novel, are strongly contradicted by scientific evidence. When Rasputin's body was found frozen beneath the ice of the river, a forensic examination offered a very different perspective on how the enigmatic monk met his end. Rasputin's autopsy. What did the facts say? Professor Dmitry Kosaratov, one of the most respected medical examiners of the time, was appointed to perform an autopsy on Rasputin's body. His findings were shocking, especially in light of Yusupov's story. The number of bullet wounds. According to Yusupov, Rasputin had been shot multiple times, including in the heart, liver, and back of the head. However, the autopsy revealed only 3 bullet wounds, one in the stomach, one in the liver, and one in the skull, which was fatal. The bullet in the stomach, this was fired from a distance and caused massive bleeding, but was not immediately fatal. The bullet in the liver, also a serious wound, but not enough to cause instant death. The bullet in the skull, this was fired from a very close range and was the one that ended Rasputin's life. Surprisingly, none of the bullets hit the heart, as Yusupov had claimed. This raises questions about the veracity of his accounts. No trace of poison. Despite claims that Rasputin ingested a massive dose of cyanide, the autopsy found no sign of poison in his stomach or organs. This has given rise to 2 main theories. Either the cyanide was neutralized by the food he consumed. There is evidence that the sugar in cakes can reduce the effect of cyanide. Or, as Dr. Lazavert later claimed, the poison was never used. The fact that Rasputin did not drown. Perhaps the most surprising detail of the autopsy was the finding that Rasputin's lungs contained no water, meaning that he was already dead when he was thrown into the river. This completely contradicts the legend that Rasputin was alive and struggling to escape even underwater. Absence of signs of struggle. Although Yusupov claims that Rasputin struggled with him and managed to get up several times, the monk's body showed no signs of injury that would indicate such a struggle. There were no bruises or other marks to support these claims. Why doesn't Yusupov's story fit with the evidence? Felix Yusupov's motivation for exaggerating the details of the assassination is still debated by historians. Some theories suggest that he wanted to create a legendary image of Rasputin. The amplification of the details of his resistance was intended to turn Rasputin into a mythical, frightening figure that would justify the need for his elimination. He sought to glorify his role in the plot. Yusupov wanted to present himself as a brave hero who faced an evil and almost supernatural adversary. He tried to hide the involvement of others. Some sources suggest that British agents who wanted to destabilize Russia were involved in Rasputin's assassination. Yusupov's exaggerations were intended to cover up the truth about who really killed him. The impact of the autopsy on the Rasputin myth. Although the autopsy contradicts many of the details offered by the conspirators, it only fueled the mystery surrounding Rasputin's death. The absence of poison, the location of the wounds, and the lack of water in the lungs raised more questions than answers. Was Rasputin protected by a supernatural force, as some of his contemporaries claimed? Or are the conflicting accounts simply the result of a hasty and chaotic plot? One thing is certain: Rasputin's death, although apparently brutal and violent, remains a historical puzzle. His autopsy, far from clarifying the situation, turned the story into an even more fascinating enigma, leaving room for speculation and theories that persist to this day. 5. The rumor that Rasputin drowned. Here is the latest information regarding the death of Grigori Rasputin. Yusupov claimed that Rasputin moved, even after he was shot in the head. The conspirators tied his hands and feet, wrapped his body in a thick sheet, carried him to a bridge and threw him into the water. Legend has it that Rasputin was still alive. When the body was found, his hands were untied and raised above his head. He untied his hands underwater, would later support Rasputin's daughter, Maria, and died by drowning. The autopsy results are very difficult to interpret. During the trial, a forensic doctor claimed that there was air in Rasputin's lungs and that he was still alive when he was thrown into the water. But the autopsy report doesn't give us a definitive answer. For one reason or another, there are different transcripts that say different things. Even today, copies of Kosoratov's autopsy report can be found that say Rasputin had no water in his lungs, and others that say he had water in his lungs. Versions of the document have even been discovered that say Rasputin was alive, the victim was still breathing when he was thrown into the water. Later, what Kosoratov wrote was changed. Was his autopsy report rewritten because of rumors? Or was it changed to hide the fact that Rasputin was still alive when he was thrown into the water? Here is a riddle with very little chance of elucidation.